What's with all these Insta360 One X reviews? Like, it's a niche product, but suddenly everyone and their grandmother is reviewing it. And surprise, surprise, all the reviews are positive. Are all these reviews paid endorsements? So in this brutally honest Insta360 One X review, I'm going to give you an in-depth look at the Insta360 One X from an industry insider's perspective. If you don't know me, my name is Mick and I've been a photographer since 2007. And I've been shooting with 360 cameras since May of 2015. I created the website 360rumors.com, which is kind of like the news and Wikipedia for 360 cameras, where I've written over 2,000 articles on 360 cameras and VR. So if you want to learn more about this exciting new way to shoot your photos and videos, then go ahead, hit subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell. So this review is divided into 4 parts. In part 1, we're going to talk about these other reviews and why they're almost all positive. And it's for a reason that's not necessarily what you think. And in part 2, we're going to take an in-depth look at the Insta360 One X. And I'm going to emphasize 7 major weaknesses. In part 3, we're going to compare the Insta360 One X to other 360 cameras. And in part 4, we're going to talk about the next version of the Insta360 One X. When are we likely to see it, and what features can we expect to see? So Insta360 has been very aggressive in reaching out to YouTubers to spread the word about 360 cameras. And there's nothing wrong with that. Insta360 looks for YouTube channels that have at least a few thousand subscribers and a relevant audience. Usually camera reviewers or tech reviewers, or sometimes something related to Insta360 like extreme sports. Then Insta360 invites them to review the Insta360 One X. And if the YouTuber says yes, then they send them the camera, sometimes some accessories as well. Insta360 doesn't tell them that they have to give a positive review. There's no strings attached. What they do get, however, is an affiliate link. When anyone buys a camera through those links, then the YouTuber gets a commission. So you could say that this creates a conflict of interest because the YouTuber is kind of incentivized to give a positive review. But is that really true? Would these YouTubers really lie to you? As a YouTuber myself, I can tell you that creating a YouTube channel takes a lot of work. And your most important asset is the trust that your viewers have in you. Now, because it takes so much time and effort to create a YouTube channel, no reputable YouTuber is going to give up their reputation and risk the trust that viewers have in them for the sake of some commissions. So they're doing their best to tell you their honest opinion. Now, if they're all being honest, then why are all the reviews positive? Well, that's because most of them are not 360 shooters. In fact, many of them say outright that this is their first 360 camera. And 360 cameras have a lot of capabilities that regular cameras don't have. So, if you've been driving a car your whole life, and suddenly you had the chance to pilot an airplane, and suddenly you could fly, you could bank, you could roll, well, of course you'd be amazed. Now, most of the things that reviewers have said about the Insta360 are also true for other stabilized 360 cameras. So for example, the extreme stabilization, or the third-person view, or the impossible angles. But wouldn't you want to know how the Insta360 One X compares to other 360 cameras? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in part 2 and part 3. I'm going to talk about the 7 weaknesses of the Insta360 One X. But as I talk about these weaknesses, I'm also going to talk about corresponding strengths so that you can decide whether these strengths offset these weaknesses. So of these 7 weaknesses, the first 4 pertain to 360 cameras in general, and then the last 3 are in comparison to other 360 cameras. So weakness number 1 is video quality. The Insta360 One X's video quality is not as good as a high quality non-360 camera or even your smartphone. And this is true for almost all 360 cameras for consumers. That's because the 5.7K video resolution of the Insta360 One X must be spread out over 360 degrees, whereas your smartphone can shoot at 4K at a narrower 70 or 80 or 90 degree field of view. Now on the other hand, the Insta360 One X has super stabilization, far beyond what's possible on a non-360 camera. In addition, with the Insta360 One X, you can capture a unique third-person view, kind of like an invisible flying camera, and that's something you can't do on a non-360 camera. Third, with the Insta360 One X, you can shoot without aiming. So what do you think? Do these three strengths offset the lower video quality of the Insta360 One X? Let me know in the comments. Weakness number 2. You have to edit and stitch your videos. On the other hand, it does have a special feature, which is the no stitch workflow. This is a unique feature for Insta360 cameras that you can edit your videos in Adobe Premiere even without stitching them. This is not just faster, but this also improves the video quality. Weakness number 3. The Insta360 One X's desktop editor is limited. This is actually one of the most common complaints that I see about the Insta360 One X. Many users have the expectation of being able to combine multiple videos into a single video. Now, although the Insta360 One X's desktop editing is limited, you can choose the perspective to show exactly the view that you want. In fact, you can choose more than one perspective at the same time. Insta360 One X also has one of the easiest workflows for 360 cameras. Now, so far we've been talking about its weaknesses compared to non-360 cameras. Now let's talk about its weaknesses compared to 360 cameras. Weakness number 4 is blur in low light. By default, the Insta360 One X uses a lower ISO and a slower shutter speed when shooting in low light to keep the noise levels down. Now this does have an effect of increasing the likelihood of motion blur. On the other hand, the Insta360 One X is one of the very few 360 cameras that has manual exposure in video. So you can choose a shutter speed that will minimize motion blur. Weakness number 5 is stitching. The Insta360 One X's stitching in video is not perfect. So if you look closely, you're going to see some ghosting. On the other hand, the Insta360 One X's lenses are close to each other, so their parallax stitching error is lower compared to most other 360 cameras. Weakness number 6 is the photo quality. The One X's photo quality is pretty good, but it's not the best for photos. There are several 360 cameras that have better photo quality, and we're going to talk about them in part 3. Now, although the One X doesn't have the best photo quality, it does have a true multi-exposure HDR mode. Weakness number 7. The Insta360 One X has several accessories and features that are still missing, even 9 months after it's been released. So the venture case is still very hard to find, and the accessory for the drift shot called the drifter is still not available. In terms of features, it's still missing video editing, the ability to combine videos into a single video, even though this is one of the features that they talked about during launch. And the desktop app doesn't have hyperlapse yet. And that's one of the most common requests that I hear almost every day about the Insta360 One X. Now, although the One X is missing many features and accessories, it still has one of the most extensive lists of features compared to other 360 cameras. You'll hear about some of them in our comparison with the GoPro Fusion later in part 3. So as you saw, the Insta360 One X is not perfect. But the truth is that for most people, none of these weaknesses are deal breakers. And if you ask experienced 360 shooters and 360 camera reviewers, there's a solid consensus that the Insta360 One X is still the best overall 360 camera for consumers as of June 2019. Find out why, watch the next part of this video, which I'm gonna post tomorrow, and we're gonna compare the Insta360 One X against other 360 cameras, including the $299 GoPro Fusion. I'm also gonna reveal a new camera that you really have to see. So don't miss it, and I'll see you in 360.